My name is Monica Rivers, and I once believed forgiveness was the highest form of love, until I stood at the operating table, watching my nephew Ethan save the life of the woman who threw him away like garbage, my sister, Ashley. When she opened her eyes post-surgery and tried to thank him, he turned and said coldly, "You're only alive because she asked me to save you. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, and if you've ever had to clean up someone else's cruelty, I want to hear your story." It started in the place I hated most, Ashley's kitchen. Sticky laminate floors, sink overflowing with cereal-crusted bowls, a half-empty bottle of boxed wine balancing on top of the microwave like a threat. The only thing more cluttered than the counter was Ashley's conscience, and even that apparently had been cleared out like expired milk. I didn't knock. I barged in. "Ashley." My voice already carried an edge sharper than her chipped ceramic knives. "Where is Ethan?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "Gone," she said flatly. "I took him to the shelter last week." I blinked, tried to absorb the words, tried to find the part where they were followed by a joke or a lie or something other than the unbearable truth. "You what?" My hand braced against the doorframe. "You took your own son to a shelter." She set the phone down with a long, exhausted sigh, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "He wasn't right, Monica. I couldn't deal with it anymore. The stimming, the silence, the way he looks at me like I'm a stranger in my own house." I stared at her, trying to reconcile this woman with the sister I had once stayed up with all night after our dad walked out, the girl who used to paint my toenails and call me Mini Mom. "You gave him away," I whispered. "Like a broken appliance." Ashley stood, arms crossed. "It's not like he even noticed I was his mother. You don't know what it was like living with that level of nothing." I did something then I hadn't done in 10 years. I slammed my fist on her counter so hard a bottle rolled off and shattered. "You are not entitled to a perfect child," I hissed. "You don't get to quit on him because you're bored." Ashley flinched but recovered fast. "It's not like you cared that much. You haven't seen him in what, 6 months?" 6 months, and whose fault was that? She never returned my calls, canceled every visit. Always some excuse: Ethan was tired, Ethan was having a bad day. No, this wasn't about me. I spun on my heel, grabbed my purse and made it to the front door before I turned back. "What shelter?" She waved vaguely toward the south side. "St. Joseph's. I filled out the paperwork. He's under care. It's done." I didn't say another word. Didn't slam the door. That would have been too generous. I left with my heart hammering like it was trying to escape my chest. Outside, the Texas night air was thick with heat and rage. My car keys slipped from my fingers twice before I finally got the door open. St. Joseph's, I knew the place. Dull gray brick, peeling white paint, the kind of place you avoid unless you've lost everything. Unless someone throws you away. I didn't cry. Not in the car, not when I parked outside the shelter. But my stomach twisted with every step. Ethan. My sweet, solemn nephew with his oversized glasses and impossible curiosity. The child who used to line up his crayons by hue and hum lullabies under his breath. Discarded, forgotten. The automatic doors whooshed open, the fluorescent lights inside jarring and cruel. I had one name in my mind, one mission in my bones. Ethan. By the time I pulled into the cracked parking lot of St. Joseph's the next morning, I hadn't slept. Not really. I'd closed my eyes a few times, sure, but they only filled with images I couldn't shake: Ethan alone in a cot. Ethan asking why his mom didn't come back. Ethan thinking it was his fault. The front desk worker, a young woman with tired eyes and a badge that read Kayla Intake, looked up as I approached. "I'm looking for Ethan Marsh," I said. "I'm his aunt, Monica Rivers." She blinked, typed something into her computer, and asked for ID. As I handed her my driver's license, her brow furrowed. "He came in 5 days ago," she said slowly. "No visitors, no contact listed other than his mother." "His mother is my sister," I said. "She abandoned him. I want to take him home." Kayla gave a small nod, not surprised, just resigned. "He's in the East Wing, follow me." The hallway was exactly what I expected: clinical, beige, too quiet. Children's art lined the walls, but even the drawings felt dim, like the color had given up halfway through. We passed a nurse, then turned a corner. And there he was. Ethan. He was sitting on a bench just outside the playroom, knees pulled to his chest, chin resting on them like he was trying to disappear inside himself. His brown curls were unbrushed, his jeans too big around the waist, and his eyes, those usually curious, bright eyes, looked dull, almost translucent under the flickering ceiling lights. I stopped walking. My throat closed up. "Ethan," I said gently, He didn't move. I approached slowly, crouching down so I was eye level. "It's Aunt Monica, sweetheart, I came for you." Still nothing, just a long, hollow stare, but when I reached out my hand he didn't flinch. He just looked at it, then back at my face. "I'm going to take you home," I whispered. "Would that be okay?" He didn't answer. But after a moment his small hand slipped into mine, and that was enough. At my house I kept everything quiet. No questions, no sudden sounds. I let him pick where to sit. He chose the corner of the living room couch, curled up with his back to the armrest like he needed walls behind him. I turned on a small lamp, then went to the kitchen to warm up some soup. The sound of the microwave ticking down filled the silence between us. "I have alphabet noodles," I said as lightly as I could. "And goldfish crackers. The orange kind, not the weird ones with colors." No reply, just his eyes, watching me. I brought the bowl over with a spoon and a folded paper towel. He didn't move. "You don't have to eat if you're not hungry," I said, placing it on the coffee table. "But I'm gonna sit here with you if that's all right." He gave the faintest shrug. I settled onto the opposite end of the couch and tried not to watch him too closely. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then I heard it, the softest clink of a spoon against ceramic. I turned slightly. He was eating. Slowly, carefully. My eyes burned with relief, but I didn't let the tears fall. Instead, I leaned back and let the warmth of the moment settle into my ribs. After the soup, he didn't speak. Just stood and walked down the hall, stopping outside the guest bedroom I'd set up with fresh sheets and a small nightlight. I followed quietly. "This is your room now," I told him. "You can sleep here as long as you want." He nodded, then stepped inside and closed the door without a sound. I stood there for a long time after, listening to the silence behind it. And I made a quiet promise: he will never feel disposable again. Not in this house. Not with me. That first night, after the soup and silence, I found myself standing in Ethan's doorway long after he'd tucked himself into bed. He was so small, smaller than I remembered. His knees were curled tightly to his chest, arms wrapped around them like a human shell. The blue quilt I'd laid out for him hung off the edge, untouched. He didn't speak, he didn't cry. He just lay there, eyes open, fixed on something only he could see. I sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to leave enough space between us. "Hey," I said gently, brushing a wrinkle from the quilt. "You know you can have the nightlight on if you want. I won't tell anyone." No answer, not even a glance. The soft hum of the ceiling fan was the only response. I watched his small chest rise and fall in shallow rhythm and couldn't stop myself from whispering, "How could she look at you and not see everything you could be?" Of course, he didn't answer. I didn't expect him to, but I hoped maybe one day he'd hear that part. The next morning was a quiet one. I woke early, tiptoed past his room, and made pancakes shaped like stars, something my mom used to do for us when we were kids. They were a little burnt around the edges. I'd never been the cook in the family. I placed them on the table with syrup and strawberries, then went to knock gently on his door. He was already awake, dressed, shoes on though the laces were uneven, hurried. He stood near the window like he was waiting for someone to take him back. "Hey, I made breakfast," I said, trying to keep it casual. "Pancakes that probably won't win awards, but they do look like stars if you squint." Ethan didn't move. "You don't have to eat with me," I added quickly. "You can bring a plate to your room if that feels better." His gaze drifted to my face, just for a moment, then back to the floor. He followed me to the kitchen but sat at the far end of the table. I passed him a plate and let him choose what to put on it. He took one pancake, no syrup, no fruit. Every bite was careful, quiet. The following days fell into a rhythm of gentle silence. Ethan didn't speak. He avoided eye contact, flinched if I moved too fast, and spent long stretches hiding in closets, under the dining table, once even in the bathtub with the curtain drawn. I stopped asking him questions after day 2. I realized the pressure to answer was too much. Instead, I offered choices. "Do you want to sit on the porch or stay in today? Mac and cheese or grilled cheese for lunch?" Every choice gave him back a sliver of control. Some days he picked neither. Some days he simply walked away. But I always said the same thing each time. "Okay, buddy, I'm here if you change your mind." One evening, I heard a thump in the hallway and found him curled in the coat closet, surrounded by jackets that smelled like cedar and dust. He didn't move when I sat on the floor across from the door. I leaned my head against the wall and sighed. "You know," I said casually, "this closet used to be my favorite hiding place too." When I was little, I'd sneak in here with a flashlight and a stack of library books. I used to pretend it was a spaceship or a submarine. Still no reply, just the sound of his quiet breath close enough to count. You don't have to talk, I added softer now, or explain, or be okay right away. I just want you to know something. I waited. A full minute passed. You're safe here, and you matter, you really matter. That night when I checked on him before bed, I found he'd lined up 3 small objects on the windowsill: a rubber dinosaur, a matchbox car, and a red button I didn't recognize. They hadn't been there the night before. It felt like a signal, a whisper: I'm here, not okay, not yet, but here. And that was enough for now. 2 weeks into our new life, I was learning how to measure progress by inches, not miles. Ethan still barely spoke, still avoided eye contact. But he no longer hid when I walked into the room. He ate at the table now, though always with his head bowed and one foot tucked under him like he needed to stay half ready to flee. And every night, I'd hear the soft shuffle of his feet as he moved around his room after bedtime, lining up toys, rearranging his books, stacking things in neat little towers I didn't dare disturb. I didn't ask questions. I just kept showing up. Most nights after dinner, I worked from the dining room table, spreadsheets open, email pings in the background. It felt a little lonely, if I'm honest, but it gave Ethan space. And sometimes I'd catch him peeking around the corner, like he was still deciding whether I was safe. This particular night, I was so buried in quarterly numbers and overdue tasks that I didn't notice he'd come into the room until something slid silently across the table beside my laptop. I jumped slightly, then looked down. A single page from one of his coloring books. Not a cartoon or a superhero, but an anatomical heart drawn in surprising detail. Aorta, ventricles, atria, all shaded carefully in red and blue, and beside each section he'd written tiny labels in the neatest handwriting I'd ever seen from a child. Left atrium, pulmonary artery, septum. My mouth opened, closed, I blinked. You drew this? I asked, glancing up. Stood there, hands behind his back, head still lowered, but for the first time I saw something different in his posture. He wasn't bracing to be scolded, he was waiting. I copied it from the book, he whispered. My breath caught, his voice. It was the first time I'd heard it in over 2 weeks, quiet, raspy, but steady. I pushed the laptop aside and turned my full attention to him. Ethan, I said gently, this is amazing. Do you like learning about hearts? He gave the smallest nod. Then I want to be a doctor. I blinked again, unsure if I'd imagined it. But the way he stood still but certain told me I hadn't. Something swelled in my chest so big and sudden I had to grip the table to ground myself. I smiled, really smiled, and leaned forward like we were sharing a secret. You know, my friend Trisha works at the hospital downtown. She gives tours sometimes. Would you ever want to see a real heart monitor, or a model of a brain? Ethan's eyes flicked up briefly. Then back to the floor. Maybe, he whispered. Maybe is good, I said, keeping my tone light. Maybe is a doorway. He didn't reply, but I noticed his shoulders had relaxed just a little. I reached for the coloring page and held it like it was precious. Would it be okay if I kept this? I asked. I'd love to put it on the fridge. For a second, he didn't answer. Then he gave the faintest shrug. I took it as a yes. As he padded out of the room, I turned the page over and saw, written on the back in pencil, "For Aunt Monica." That's when the tears came quietly, without drama, slipping down my cheeks before I could stop them. He hadn't just spoken. He'd given me something, his trust, his voice, a glimpse of the future he still dared to imagine. And in that moment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and unfinished work emails, I felt the first warm flicker of real hope. It started as a casual Google search. Best science schools for gifted middle schoolers. I typed one evening while Ethan was asleep, the now iconic heart drawing still clipped to the fridge behind me. A rabbit hole opened instantly. Private STEM academies, early admission prep courses, pre-med tracks for high-achieving students, and with every enthusiastic blurb came the sucker punch of the tuition column. $28,000 a year, $32,500. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly, the warmth from my tea long gone. I had just paid off my car loan 3 months ago, finally feeling like I could breathe again financially. But this was another mountain entirely. And yet I couldn't shake that night. The way Ethan had said it, quiet but certain. I want to be a doctor. Not a passing whim, not a child's fantasy. A declaration. I wasn't about to let life clip his wings because of a price tag. The next afternoon, I called Trisha, my best friend since high school and now a nurse at Cedar Ridge Medical Center. "Lunch?" I asked. Her response was instant. "Only if you let me pay this time. I still owe you for covering the bachelorette brunch from like 3 years ago." We met at a small cafe near the hospital, the kind with hand-lettered chalkboard menus and lemon water in mason jars. Trisha was already seated when I walked in, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun and scrubs still creased from the morning shift. "So," she asked, sipping her iced coffee, "how's your boy genius?" I smiled. He drew the human heart from memory, labeled everything, and then told me he wants to be a doctor. Trisha's eyebrows rose. "How old is he again?" 10. "Girl," she leaned back. "You better buy that child a lab coat." "I would," I said, trying to keep the smile on my face, "if I wasn't already spiraling over how we're ever going to afford the kind of education he needs." I laid it out, what I'd found online, the tuition numbers, the dizzying costs of med school down the line. "I want to help him, Trish," I said, voice cracking more than I meant it to. "But how do you pay for med school when you've just paid off your car?" She was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You do what you've always done," she said. "You fight for him, one step at a time." That night I showed Ethan an online portal for a local science fair. "You don't have to do this," I told him, "but I thought you might want to see what other kids are working on." He stared at the screen for a while, then whispered, "Can I enter?" My heart stuttered. "Of course." He spent the next week building a model of a circulatory system from straws and tubing. He explained it to me in soft, careful sentences, using terms I hadn't heard since college biology. He wasn't just smart, he was focused. Diligent. Every label was precise, every color coded. The judges didn't stand a chance. He won first place. After that, the floodgates opened. He started writing letters to scholarship programs. Quietly, without being asked. He'd disappear into his room with a notepad and resurface with an envelope and a stamp. One morning, I found a draft of his essay tucked under a library book. I used to think I was broken, but now I know I'm just different. And different isn't bad, it's just a different kind of good. I had to sit down after reading that. On Sunday morning, while folding laundry, I found myself watching Ethan as he studied a YouTube video of a heart valve replacement surgery. He paused the screen, rewound, scribbled a note, repeated the process. I folded a dish towel and said quietly, more to myself than to him, "If there's a way, we'll find it." I didn't know how, or when, but I believed it with everything I had. The letter came on a Wednesday. One of those plain white envelopes with a return address that didn't mean much, at first glance. I nearly tossed it into the pile of coupons and dentist appointment reminders on the counter. It wasn't until I saw the words Future Scholars State Initiative in the corner that my hands froze. No one sent rejections in a crisp white envelope with real weight to it. This one had substance. Purpose. My heart pounded as I tore it open, standing barefoot in the driveway, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. It was one sheet, one page that changed everything. "We are thrilled to inform you that Ethan Marsh has been selected as a recipient of the Future Scholars Full Academic Grant. This grant includes coverage of all pre-medical preparatory education, college tuition, books, and a living stipend through medical school, pending standard admissions requirements." I read it twice, then again, and on the third time I dropped to my knees on the asphalt and sobbed so hard I forgot I was in public. I didn't care who saw. I didn't care that my knees were scraping against tiny gravel pebbles or that a neighbor's dog had started barking, because it was real. Someone somewhere read Ethan's essays, saw his file, saw the boy I'd come to love like my own and said, "Yes, you belong, you matter." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and stood, half running into the house, still gripping the letter like it might vanish if I loosened my hold. "Ethan," I called, breathless. "Where are you, baby?" His voice floated in from the dining room. "Here." I burst into the room, laughing through fresh tears. "You got it. The scholarship. Ethan, you got it." He blinked at me startled, then cautiously reached for the paper I was waving. His eyes scanned the letter slowly, carefully, like he wanted to be sure it was real. When he looked up, his face was unreadable. Then that smile. Small, shy, and brighter than anything I'd seen in weeks. "I did," he whispered. "You did," I whispered back, hugging him carefully, giving him room to pull away if he needed, but he didn't. Instead, he leaned into me just a little and let out a breath I think he'd been holding for years. "You did this," I said into his hair, voice thick. "You made this happen." He shrugged against my shoulder, but his grin stayed. That night, I made spaghetti with garlic bread and let him choose the movie. He picked a documentary about NASA surgeries in space, and I pretended not to fall asleep halfway through. We didn't toast with champagne. There wasn't a banner or a cake, but the house felt different. Lighter, like possibility had finally pulled up a chair and said, "We're staying for a while." Later, after he'd gone to bed and I was cleaning up dishes, I caught a glimpse of the fridge, the coloring page still pinned where it had always been. Beside it now, with a magnet shaped like a heart, I pinned the letter. And for the first time since that night in Ashley's kitchen, I let myself believe that we were going to be okay. Better than okay. We were going to win. It was one of those rare Sundays where the house felt settled. The late morning sun warmed the kitchen tile. Ethan was upstairs humming softly as he organized his bookshelf by scientific importance. His words, not mine, and I was midway through scrambling eggs and humming to an old Otis Redding song on the radio. Then came the knock. 3 short, sharp raps. No doorbell, no text ahead of time. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe Trisha dropping by early with the cinnamon rolls she'd promised for brunch. But when I opened the door, all the warmth drained from the room behind me. Ashley stood there. Hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, makeup perfect even on a casual day, arms crossed like she needed them to hold something in, regret or pride, I couldn't tell. She was holding a grocery bag, a peace offering maybe, or a decoy. "Hi," she said, voice lighter than it had any right to be. I was in the area. Of course she was. I stepped aside without speaking. Not because I wanted her here, but because I didn't want this playing out on my porch where the neighbors could see. She stepped in, eyes darting around like she expected the house to look wildly different now that Ethan lived here. It didn't, not much, but something about the energy had shifted since he arrived, a steadiness, a quiet care woven into the walls. Ashley didn't seem to notice. "I brought herbal tea," she said, holding up the bag. "The kind you used to like." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean before you stopped returning my calls for 2 years?" She gave a tight smile and walked toward the kitchen like she still had permission. "Is he here?" she asked, placing the tea on the counter. "Ethan," I didn't answer right away. I set the eggs on low and leaned against the sink. "Yes," I said finally. "He's upstairs. I'd like to see him." I turned, arms folded now. "You'd like to?" Ashley's smile faltered. "I thought maybe, I don't know, maybe we could talk, start over." I stared at her, stunned by the simplicity with which she said it, as if all she'd done, what she'd not done, could be reset like a light switch. "He's not ready," I said, "not even close." "But it's been months." I laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. "And you think that's all it takes?" Ashley's eyes narrowed, defensive. "You don't think I regret what I did?" "I don't care what you regret," I said, my voice quieter now. "Regret doesn't feed a child, doesn't calm him when he wakes up screaming from a memory he doesn't have words for yet." A long pause settled between us. Then a quiet knock came from the top of the stairs. Ethan's voice, barely audible. "Is it her?" I turned to look up the staircase. "Yeah, baby, but you don't have to come down, not unless you want to." Silence. Then the soft creak of his bedroom door closing. Ashley flinched like the sound stung her. "He doesn't want to see me, does he?" she asked, voice dry. I didn't look at her when I said it, I just went back to stirring the eggs. "What did you expect?" She stood there for another minute, maybe waiting for me to soften, maybe for Ethan to change his mind. Neither of us did. Eventually, she walked to the door without another word, her heels clicking against the tile like punctuation. Just before she stepped out, I said, "He's doing well, by the way. Won a science fair. Got into a full scholarship program." I didn't know why I said it. Maybe part of me wanted her to feel the weight of what she nearly destroyed. Or maybe I wanted her to know, without question, that Ethan didn't just survive her leaving. He rose. Ashley paused, hand on the doorknob. "Of course he did," she said softly. "He always was smarter than the rest of us." Then she left. And I stood in the kitchen, staring at her forgotten bag of herbal tea, the kettle whistling softly behind me like it had been holding its breath too. The house had settled back into stillness by evening, but it wasn't the kind that comforts. It was the kind of quiet that pressed on your chest, like something was waiting to be said, and everyone knew it. Ethan had stayed in his room after Ashley left. He didn't come down for lunch, barely touched his dinner, and hadn't peeked into the living room like he usually did when I worked through my emails. His absence was loud. I didn't push. But I left his favorite blanket on the couch, made hot cocoa anyway, and waited, half watching a nature documentary I wasn't really absorbing. It wasn't until just past 9 that I heard the soft pad of his socks on the stairs. He came into the room slowly, hesitating at the doorway. "Hey," I said gently, setting the remote down. "There's cocoa, if you want it, still warm." He nodded and crossed the room without a word, curling up on the opposite end of the couch, pulling the blanket onto his lap like a familiar ritual. We sat there in silence for a while, the hum of the television filling the space between us. I didn't look at him. I didn't ask, but after a long minute he said it. "She isn't my mom." His voice was small but clear. His eyes stayed on the flickering screen. I swallowed. She gave birth to me," he continued. "But that's not what a mom is." "Not really." The words sat between us like glass, fragile and sharp. I turned to face him slowly, letting the pause breathe before I responded. "You're right," I said quietly. "Being a mom isn't biology, it's care. It's choosing someone over and over." He nodded, still not looking at me. "I don't want her to be my mom," he said. "Even if she comes back, even if she cries again." I could hear the edge in his voice, more steady this time, like he'd been rehearsing these words in his head all day, maybe longer. I didn't try to explain Ashley. I didn't try to defend her. Instead, I reached for his mug of cocoa and passed it to him. "That's your right," I said. "You get to decide who your people are." He took the cup with both hands and stared into the steam for a long moment. "Do you think she ever loved me?" he asked suddenly. The question hit me like a punch. I didn't lie. "I think she didn't know how to, not the way you needed. And that's not your fault, Ethan, that's hers." His throat bobbed as he swallowed, eyes still locked on the mug. "She didn't even say my name," he whispered. "When she was standing in the hallway, she didn't ask if I was okay, she just waited." I blinked back the sting in my eyes. "I know." The silence returned, but it wasn't hollow this time. It was full of knowing. Full of the awful understanding that sometimes the people meant to love us the most are the ones who hurt us deepest. And sometimes, they don't even know what they've done. After a long while, Ethan curled into the corner of the couch, resting his head on a throw pillow. His voice was barely audible when he spoke again. "I don't want to think about her anymore, but I still do." I reached over, brushing the hair gently from his forehead. "That's normal, baby. You don't have to rush that part. Healing doesn't mean forgetting." His eyes fluttered closed. I sat beside him long after he fell asleep, listening to the soft rhythm of his breath and wondering just how many pieces of himself Ashley had left for me to gather, and whether love alone would be enough to put them all back together. The ceremony was held in the main auditorium of Cedar Ridge Medical Center, dressed up for the occasion with deep blue drapery and silver balloons that floated like soft punctuation over rows of folding chairs. The kind of event where families took up whole rows with flowers and signs, where camera flashes sparkled like applause. I sat near the back, not because I didn't want to be close, but because I needed the full view. I needed to see him, the whole picture, from where we started to where he stood now. Ethan. Ethan in a black suit that somehow made him look 25 and 10 at the same time. His hair combed, his shoulders squared, his name embroidered in soft gray thread across a crisp white coat. E. Marsh, MD, Resident General Surgery. If someone had told me that day in Ashley's kitchen, the day she tossed away her own child like an unwanted object, that this moment would follow, I wouldn't have believed them. Not because I didn't believe in him. I always did. But I never imagined the world would see him the way I did. Now they did. The dean from the university gave a long, winding speech. The hospital's director followed with one that was shorter, sweeter, and filled with the kind of pride you only get when your top pick for residency once scored higher on his entrance exam than half the attending physicians. Then came the names. The crowd clapped politely for each graduate as they crossed the stage, shook hands, accepted their plaques, and posed for pictures. When they called Ethan's name, Dr. Ethan Marsh, awarded surgical residency, Cedar Ridge Medical Center, the applause shifted. It wasn't louder necessarily, it was deeper, a ripple of recognition. People knew. Ethan stood straighter than I'd ever seen him, his steps measured, his face calm. But I saw it in the way his fingers flexed slightly at his sides. The way he glanced toward the audience, toward me for the briefest moment before shaking the director's hand. And then it was time for the class representative's speech. To my surprise, Ethan stepped up to the podium. He hadn't told me he'd been chosen. Of course he hadn't. Typical Ethan, still quiet, still understated, still never wanting the spotlight unless it had a purpose. He cleared his throat. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice steady. "But I was asked to say a few words about what it means to reach this moment." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "I think most of us get here because someone believed in us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves." Another pause. "For me, that person is here tonight. She's the reason I'm standing here. The reason I didn't give up when the world told me I didn't matter." He looked toward the back of the auditorium, toward me. My heart stopped. "She took me in when no one else would. Gave me a home when I didn't know what that meant. Gave me her name when mine didn't feel like it belonged to anyone." My breath hitched. "I owe this moment," he said, "to the woman who saved me not just from a place or a situation but from the lie that I was disposable." He smiled then, soft, private. "Thank you, Aunt Monica." There it was. The moment I hadn't known I was waiting for. I felt every word like it was etched into my skin. Audience clapped, the kind of applause that came from people who understood. A few turned toward me, nodding, smiling, nurses who'd watched Ethan grow, teachers who'd seen his spark, strangers who'd heard his story. I didn't cry. Not until the car ride home. Not until we pulled into the driveway and Ethan, still wearing his white coat, looked at me across the console and said, "You know this was your victory too, right?" And I whispered, "No, this one's all yours." But in my heart, I knew it was both. Because love, real love, isn't about getting credit. It's about seeing someone through the darkness until they can stand in the light, and watching as they finally shine. The storm hit just after dusk. Rain slammed against the kitchen windows like it had something to prove, wind gusting so hard the power flickered twice. I was halfway through washing dishes when my cell buzzed on the counter, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Monica Rivers." A woman's voice asked quickly. "Yes. This is Nurse Chavez from St. Vincent ER. We have an incoming patient, Ashley Marsh. She's listed you as next of kin." My breath caught. "Ashley," I echoed. "What happened?" "She was in a car accident, single vehicle. It looks like she lost control on I-35, hit a divider, severe internal trauma. We've prepped her for emergency surgery, but..." The nurse hesitated, then softened her voice. "We don't know if she'll make it through the night." Everything around me seemed to slow. "How bad?" I managed. "She's conscious, barely, and asking for Ethan." I froze, that name, that request. "I'm sorry," the nurse continued. "I wouldn't normally ask, but she may not have another chance to speak to him." I hung up without responding, and stood there, hands dripping dishwater, heart racing like I'd just been shoved onto a tightrope I didn't ask to walk. What was I supposed to do? Ashley, the sister who abandoned her son. The woman who discarded motherhood like it was a chore she didn't feel like finishing. But also the girl I'd shared bunk beds with. The girl who used to braid my hair before school and sneak extra cupcakes into my lunchbox on field trips. I wiped my hands mechanically, grabbed my keys, and sat in the car. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I called Ethan. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, his voice calm, warm, still fresh off the glow of graduation just days before. "What's up?" I swallowed, unsure how to even begin. "There's been an accident," I said carefully. "Ashley, she's at St. Vincent. They're prepping her for surgery. It's serious." Silence on the other end. Then a quiet, measured, "Is she going to die?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe, they said she asked for you." Another long pause. And then softly, "Why?" My throat closed. "I don't know, maybe because deep down, she knows you're the only person left who could care enough to come." "I don't care, though." I closed my eyes. "I know, and I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm not asking you to do it for her." "Then for who?" I took a breath. "For me." More silence. "She's not your mother," I said, quieter now. "You've said that, and I don't disagree, but she's still a human being. Still the woman who brought you into this world. I won't pretend she didn't fail you in every way that counts." I paused. "But Ethan, if there's a chance you could save her and you don't, that will live in you whether you want it to or not." The line crackled, quiet but alive with tension. I could feel his conflict through the phone like static in my bones. "You're asking a lot," he finally said. "I know," I whispered. A beat passed, then softly, so softly I almost missed it. "Okay, just that, okay." The operating room was quiet, focused. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm, tools glinted under sterile light, and for all the chaos that had brought us here, Ethan's hands didn't shake. Not once. I watched from the observation gallery, standing so still I forgot to breathe. Below, behind the mask and cap, Ethan was unrecognizable, not the boy who used to flinch at footsteps or hide in coat closets, not even the man who once whispered, "I don't want her to be my mom." He was a surgeon, efficient, controlled, impossibly calm. Ashley lay still on the table, her face pale beneath the oxygen mask, ribs fractured, abdomen open, internal bleeding that could have ended her life within the hour if not for him. A wreckage of organs and ruptured vessels she couldn't see, but Ethan could, and he knew exactly what to do. The chief attending stood across from him, offering guidance but rarely stepping in. It was clear to everyone in that room who was leading the repair. When Ethan asked for clamps, they were passed without hesitation. When he called out stats, his voice was even, detached. She was just another patient, not a mother, not a memory, just a body needing saving, and he saved her. He didn't hesitate, he didn't speak to her, he didn't even look at her face, but he saved her life. 3 days passed before she was strong enough to sit up. I visited, mostly in silence, bringing her water and helping her with the nurse call button. She winced whenever she moved, more from shame than pain, I suspected. "Where is he?" she asked on the second morning. I didn't answer. On the third evening, Ethan came, not in scrubs, not in a lab coat, in jeans and a navy hoodie, his shoulders square, his face unreadable. I waited in the hallway, but I could hear every word through the crack in the door. Ashley looked up when he entered, eyes wide, lips parting like she expected warmth. Familiarity. She got neither. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. "You're alive," he said flatly. She swallowed. I know. He held up a hand. "Let me stop you before you say something like, thank you." Her mouth stayed open, but no sound came. "You're alive not because you're my mother," he continued, voice sharper now. "You're alive because she asked me to save you." He pointed toward the hallway toward me. Ashley's eyes filled. "Ethan," he shook his head. "You left me in a shelter, you called me broken, you didn't visit, you didn't write. And then, when your body gave out, you asked for me." His voice didn't rise. "That's what made it worse. You don't get to cry now, you don't get to want me because I became someone you recognize." Ashley tried to speak, tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "I'm not here for forgiveness," he said. "I came because she asked, that's it." He turned, opened the door, and paused when he saw me. "I'm going home," he said softly. "You coming?" I looked past him into the room. Ashley sat slumped against the pillows, sobbing now, quiet, ragged, the sound of someone unraveling under the weight of their own choices. "I'll be right behind you," I told him. When he left, I stepped inside, took the chair next to her bed, and waited until she could meet my eyes. "You should know," I said. "He wrote your name on every medical form, refused to let anyone else sign it." Ashley let out a broken laugh. "Why?" "Because you're still technically his mother. And he's still the kind of person who honors that, even when you don't deserve it." She covered her face with her hands, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel pity or fury, just clarity. "Now you know what you threw away," I said, standing. "The irony is he still became everything you hoped for, just without you." I left her there with her tears. She wasn't the villain anymore, just the wreckage. The first card arrived a week after Ashley was discharged. It was resting on our front porch, left carefully between the potted succulents Ethan had arranged beside the welcome mat. Pale blue with a silver "thank you" embossed on the front. No envelope, no signature, just a short message inside, written in the tight, tidy handwriting I hadn't seen in years. "I hope one day you'll want to talk. I'll be here when you're ready." Ethan didn't mention it. He walked past it on his way inside from his shift at the hospital, still wearing his white coat, stethoscope slung casually around his neck like it belonged there, which it did. I picked up the card after he'd gone upstairs and placed it in the drawer by the microwave, the one where we keep batteries, old takeout menus, and things that don't belong anywhere else. It felt like the right place for it. The next attempt came 3 days later, a voicemail. Her voice was shaky but practiced. "Hi, Monica. It's me. I was just wondering if Ethan might want to get coffee, or lunch, just talk. I know I don't deserve anything, but maybe he'd want to see me. Please tell him I called." I didn't. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I had learned, finally, that not every message deserves to be delivered. Ethan had said what he needed to say. And in our house, his silence now meant something sacred, a boundary. A line drawn not in anger but in healing. One night, over stir-fry and jasmine rice, I asked gently, "Have you thought about if or when you might want to talk to her?" Ethan took a slow sip of water, set the glass down. I think I'll always be curious, he said, about what she'll say, what she thinks. He looked up at me then. But I'm not sure I want to let her say it. I nodded. That's your right. She's trying, he added, softer now. I get that. But I'm not ready to open that door. Not yet, maybe not ever. I reached across the table and gave his hand a quick squeeze. You don't owe her access. Just because she's your past doesn't mean she gets a piece of your future. He gave me a small, crooked smile. I already gave that piece to you. That night I cried alone in the bathroom, quietly. The good kind of tears, the kind that come when love is clear and choice is confirmed. Ashley continued her quiet attempts. A second card. A plant left on the porch that Ethan didn't bring inside. A letter unopened which I eventually slid into the same drawer as the first card. When she texted me, I finally replied. Monica, he might forgive you one day. But that doesn't mean he'll forget, or that he should. Her answer came 5 minutes later. Ashley, I know, it was the first honest thing I'd seen from her in years. Meanwhile, Ethan buried himself in the work he'd always wanted. Long shifts, early mornings, late night studying, and a quiet, steady joy that I saw in the way he described procedures over dinner, in the articles he bookmarked for me to read, in the way he stood a little taller when he walked into his hospital. He didn't talk about Ashley again, and I didn't ask. But one Sunday morning, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. His lab coat hanging on the laundry room hook. Inside the pocket, folded so small it looked like a receipt, was that first blue thank you card. I didn't touch it. I just closed the door quietly, because maybe he hadn't thrown it away, but he hadn't answered it either. And that's what healing looks like sometimes. Not erasing the past, just refusing to carry it with both hands. The day of the dedication was warm, the kind of late spring morning where the breeze carries the promise of something new. I stood beside Ethan on a raised platform outside the gleaming new wing of Cedar Ridge Medical Center, sunlight glinting off the freshly polished sign above the double doors. The Monica Rivers Pediatric Wing. I'd known it was coming. He hadn't kept it a surprise, but I hadn't seen the sign until that moment. And somehow, nothing prepared me for the sight of my name carved in brushed silver across the entrance to a place built for healing. There were flowers in tall glass vases, a crowd of hospital staff, city officials, and donors in neatly pressed suits. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to Ethan's medical school graduation. It felt like it belonged to this moment too. Ethan stood at the podium, white coat buttoned, a stethoscope slung loose around his neck. He looked every bit the man he had become, calm, grounded, and so sure of his place in the world. But when he smiled before speaking, it was still the same boy who used to hide in closets. Thank you all for being here today, he began. This wing means something more than just expanded services or modern equipment. It's a promise. A promise to every child who walks through those doors that they matter, no matter where they come from or what they've survived. He paused, letting that land. I stand here today because someone made that promise to me once when I was just a scared, quiet kid who didn't believe I was worth saving. He turned slightly, looking right at me. Monica Rivers didn't just take me in. She fought for me, believed in me before I knew how to believe in myself. She taught me what love looks like when it's relentless, patient, fierce. The crowd was silent now, not out of politeness but reverence. You didn't just save me, Ethan said. You helped me become someone who saves others. My breath hitched, but I didn't cry, not yet, not in front of everyone. He stepped away from the podium then, walking toward me with a small velvet box in his hand. He opened it to reveal a gold pin shaped like an anatomical heart, delicate, detailed, beautiful. I know you hate the spotlight, he said in a quieter voice, but I also know you'd wear this, quietly, like armor. He pinned it just over my heart. The applause that followed washed over me, warm and distant like waves, but I didn't hear much of it. Because all I could think, standing there beside him, was, this is the moment we rewrote the story. Not with revenge, but with redemption. Justice hadn't come in a courtroom or through apologies. It came in the form of one boy's life, saved, rebuilt, and risen. And my tears, though silent, said everything that words never could. That was the end of our story. The part where pain stopped defining us and love quietly finished what betrayal started. But I still think about Ethan's choice in that operating room, when he saved Ashley's life even after everything she'd done to him, and I sometimes wonder, did he do the right thing by saving the woman who abandoned him, or would you have walked away? Tell me in the comments what you think, and if you've ever faced a moment like that, where someone had to decide between justice and compassion. And if this story moved you in any way, please like and subscribe so I can keep sharing the kinds of stories that remind us what strength really looks like.